Hi, I'm May. I was erased from my own family, bit by bit, birthday by birthday, business decision by business decision. They gave my little brother a garage and photoshopped me into the family portrait I was never invited to. But it wasn't just exclusion. It was manipulation, betrayal, stolen legacy. Why did they need me invisible to keep everything intact? The smell of cinnamon rolls hit me first. Soft, warm, innocent. Then came the sound. Laughter, little feet against tile, a father humming off-key as he lit candles. I stood in the doorway of a cafe in downtown Lexington, pretending to scroll through my phone while my eyes locked on the scene inside. A girl, maybe 9 or 10, blowing out candles while her dad filmed her with a grin that wrapped the whole room in certainty. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the barista bumped into me and muttered, "Oh, sorry, ma'am." Ma'am. That word slapped harder than I expected. I turned around and left. The walk back to my car was short, but not fast enough. Something in me had already snapped open, spilling out 16 years of silence I'd locked away like an old, shameful letter. 16 years ago, I had a birthday too. The living room smelled of barbecue and lemon pledge. Aunts, uncles, neighbors, I can't even remember all their names, crowded into the room like they'd been promised something worth seeing. What they got was Beau, my little brother, 6 years old and already wearing confidence like cologne. There were 2 presents in front of us, one for him, one for me. Mine was flat, wrapped in craft paper, no ribbon. Inside was a leather-bound journal, unlined, blank. Mom touched my shoulder and said, "For your thoughts, sweetheart." Then Dad clapped and shouted, "Okay, time for the big one." Beau tore into his gift like a dog into a steak, plastic flying, eyes wide. A drone, top of the line, even had a camera. "Whoa," he gasped. "Is this real?" Dad beamed. "Real enough to make you the coolest kid on the block." People clapped. Not for me, not once. I sat back, hands resting on my lap, my new journal on top like a tombstone. No one noticed I hadn't smiled. "You're really raising a genius," someone told my parents. "He's a natural." "He's going to run that garage one day," Dad said, grinning like he already saw Beau's name on the building. My stomach turned. I didn't even like mechanics. But what scraped deeper was that no one had ever looked at me like that, like I could be something, like I could be someone. "May," Mom said sweetly, snapping me out of my haze. "Why don't you let Beau show you how the drone works?" I didn't move. She leaned closer. "Don't sulk, honey. Today's special. For all of us." Except it wasn't. Not for me. That night, after everyone left, I walked past Beau's room where he was still up, chattering to Dad about propellers. I headed to the garage. It smelled like rust and motor oil and old secrets. I turned on a single light and sat at the wooden bench Grandpa Royce built before I was born. I opened the journal, wrote one line. "Happy birthday, Beau. Love, Mom." Then I crossed it out and underneath scribbled, "Note to self, this was never about me." My hand didn't shake. That's the part that stayed with me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry yet. Just erased. But the part that came next, that's when the real hurt took root. I was walking back through the kitchen when I heard them. Mom and Aunt Dessa, voices low, like guilt only whispered. "The partners loved Beau tonight. Everything went exactly as planned," Mom said. Dessa didn't respond. Just the sound of her mug clinking against the counter. "Don't give me that look," Mom added quickly. "It's a business. Appearances matter. That drone? It was a pitch wrapped in a bow. You made it look like a birthday." "It was. Just not hers." The silence that followed stretched like smoke, slow, suffocating. I didn't go upstairs. I went back to the garage, stayed there for hours, didn't cry, didn't write, just sat in that oily silence and tried to figure out what part of me they'd decided didn't belong. They didn't forget my birthday. They reassigned it. Now, standing outside that cafe, I pull out my phone. The screen lights up. A notification from a business newsletter I forgot I subscribed to. Garage grand opening. Rourke Legacy. A son's journey. I stare at it. Then I whisper, "Not this time." And I walk toward the past like someone walking into a storm they've trained their whole life to survive. The air in the co-working space was dry and recycled, filled with the muted clatter of keyboards and the low buzz of hustle. I'd just finished outlining a proposal for a mid-size logistics client when a young coordinator from the next floor stopped by my desk. "May, you've been requested to speak at Northwestern's Women in Engineering seminar. You were nominated by one of the mentors there, said you'd be perfect for the Breaking Barriers panel." I smiled politely, nodded, thanked her, then stared at the wall like it had just whispered something obscene. Breaking barriers? That would have been rich, if I'd ever been allowed inside the damn gates. 16 years ago, I was 17 and hopeful in a way I hadn't been since. The kind of hopeful that makes your chest buzz. I held the acceptance letter like it was a golden ticket. Prestigious, competitive, fully funded. A summer program for young women in engineering, hosted by Stanford. The dream. Dad was reading the paper at the kitchen island. I waited for the right moment. There wasn't one. I handed him the letter. He scanned it, raised an eyebrow. "Engineering?" "Yeah," I said. "You always said I asked too many questions. Thought I'd put it to good use." He forced a grin. "Well, that's unexpected." Mom was rinsing strawberries at the sink. "Stanford's in California, right?" I nodded. "It's just a summer program." Dad folded the paper again. Too neat, too quick. "And who's paying for your flight?" "It's covered," I said. "All expenses." Bo walked in then, waving a rough sketch for his 6th grade science fair project. Something about magnets and marbles. Dad's attention shifted like I'd never spoken. He clapped Bo on the shoulder. "Now this looks like a winner. You got your mama's brains and your old man's hands." I stood there, letter in hand, as if that moment had decided something final. A few days later, the funding was withdrawn. The letter from the program coordinator was carefully worded, clinical. "Due to changes in your application support materials, we must regrettably rescind your scholarship offer." I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. My counselor wouldn't say much. Just looked at me with that same tight sympathy adults reserve for kids who are learning too early that fairness is optional. That night at dinner, I watched my parents. Mom refilled Bo's glass. Dad asked him how many rotations his magnets completed. No one mentioned my face, my silence. The letter I'd left folded next to the napkin holder. I didn't cry. I just stopped talking. And no one noticed. Months passed. College applications came and went. I adjusted my expectations like a gymnast learning to land on bruised ankles. Then one afternoon, I was using Dad's office printer. He was out, and his computer pinged. An unsent draft email, still open. The subject line hit me first. Re-recommendation update, May Rourke. I clicked. My mother had written it. May is bright, but not emotionally suited for an intense technical environment. We fear her sensitive nature may make her ill-equipped to thrive in engineering. We hope you'll consider this when reviewing her candidacy. Signed, Ivy Rourke, on behalf of our family. I didn't breathe for at least a minute, just stared, frozen, while the screen blurred in front of me. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me, it was that they never had. I plugged in my flash drive, saved the draft, closed the tab. Dinner that night was meatloaf. Bo talked about soccer practice. Mom asked if I'd seen the sweater on sale at Kohl's. I said nothing. Again, no one noticed, so I adjusted again. I switched my major to business, not because I cared for it, but because it was practical and impersonal. I took night classes, waitressed on weekends, built a resume from the ground up with jobs they never asked about. I graduated without ceremony, no family photos, no celebration dinner, just a quiet receipt and the knowledge that I'd paid for every cent myself. And after that, I stopped sharing. No updates, no holiday visits, no Christmas cards. If they couldn't picture me there, I once wrote in my second journal, then I'll go further than they ever dared to look. Present day. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from a number I hadn't blocked but probably should have. It was my father. "May, it's about your brother. The expansions hit some hiccups. We could use your input. Just think about the family." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over delete, but I didn't press it. Not yet. The ping from my phone was innocent. A LinkedIn notification. I almost ignored it. Just another connection, another inspirational quote from someone who built a career on buzzwords. But the words, "Congratulations, May Rourke," caught my eye. I opened it. Blinked. Featured in Business Monthly, meet the family behind Kentucky's fastest-growing auto brand. I clicked the link, and there it was, a banner photo at the top of the article. Beau standing front and center, arms crossed, his smile modest but confident. Behind him, our parents, smiling, framed, supportive, and next to them, me. I stared. I didn't remember taking that photo, because I hadn't. It was an edit. A crude one if you knew where to look. The lighting on my face didn't match the room, my shoulder blurred where it overlapped Mom's, but the caption made it worse. The Rourke family, united behind Beau's bold vision. I wasn't united. I wasn't even notified. They'd photoshopped me into a story I hadn't been invited to live, and yet, this was the first time I'd been included in anything since I left. The irony burned like acid. I closed the article, but I didn't move. 16 months ago, I came home for Thanksgiving. First time in years. I'd made reservations at a hotel, but Mom insisted, "You'll stay here. It's still your home." I believed her. That was my first mistake. Dinner was predictably tight-lipped. Beau talked about expansion plans for the business, something about a second location. Dad added vague statements about growing beyond the county line. I didn't interrupt. I didn't question. Until dessert was served. That's when Dad said it. So casual I almost missed it. "Oh, and starting next quarter, Beau will be managing the new branch off Route 9. We signed the lease last week." Everyone clapped. Even Aunt Denise. I put down my fork. "No one told me about this," I said. Dad looked confused. "Told you what?" "About the expansion. The new location." "You left, May." "So?" I replied, voice tight. "I still work in business strategy. I could have helped." He shrugged. "You didn't want any of this." I held his gaze. "You never asked." He paused, as if deciding whether to soften or strike. Then he said, "We didn't need to." That line cut more than he knew. And now? This article, this fake image of unity, it was salt in that wound. I reread the byline. The journalist had reached out to the family weeks ago for quotes. I hadn't gotten an email, a text, nothing. Not even a courtesy heads up that my face would be used as decoration in Beau's hero narrative. I remembered what Dessa once told me when I was 15 and hiding in the garage after a fight with Mom. "They'll use you when it suits them. Don't let them erase you when it doesn't." They'd tried to erase me. Then, when convenient, they pasted me back in. I clicked open my budgeting software, logged into my flight rewards portal, booked a one-way ticket to Lexington. Then I grabbed my journal, the one with the broken spine and the folded corners. I flipped to the last page and wrote, "If I'm going to be in the picture, I'll frame it myself." The house didn't smell the same. That was my first thought as I stepped inside. There used to be a quiet scent of basil from Dessa's windowsill pots, a trace of cinnamon from her coffee. Now, the air felt still, like something had been paused mid-breath and never resumed. Dessa sat at the dining table, still in her coat. A thin envelope rested on her lap, unopened but already opened, like she couldn't bring herself to move it. She didn't look up when I spoke. "I came straight from the airport." She nodded once. "They served me." The way she said it, like she'd been handed a verdict, not a notice, made something tighten in my chest. I picked up the letter and read it before she had to explain. 30 days to vacate the premises, legally drafted, signed by my father. "Business necessity," it said. Of course. I dropped the envelope onto the table like it had burned me. "I don't understand," I said. Though I did. I understood exactly what this was. It wasn't about financial strain. It wasn't even about Beau. This was a surgical erasure, one signature at a time. "This house wasn't his to take," I muttered. Dessa stood slowly, her voice even but cold. "It never was, but when has that ever stopped him?" The words sat between us like frost. Later that night, I sat on the porch swing alone. The wind was dry, my eyes burned. This house held all my beginnings. I remembered lying on the grass with Grandpa Royce as he taught me the constellations. The time I spilled flour all over Dessa's floor learning to bake biscuits. The promise Grandma Edra whispered when I was 10 and crying over some forgotten slight. "This house will always be yours." I believed her. Until now. I pulled out my laptop and began searching property records. It didn't take long. The lien was public, filed 2 years ago. My father had used the house as collateral to secure a business loan. Quietly, no notice, no discussion, no consent. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated move, executed with silence and paperwork. A knot of rage coiled in my gut. The next morning, I went to the original garage. Dad was at the front counter, laughing too loudly with a customer. He froze when he saw me. I didn't wait for pleasantries. You used the house as collateral. He blinked, played dumb. What house? You know which one. It's business, May. I didn't blink. You forged legacy into leverage. That wasn't business. That was theft. He gave a short laugh, like I was overreacting. You don't understand how this works. I understand more than you think. I understand what control smells like when it's disguised as strategy. He stepped forward, voice lower. Watch your tone. I leaned in just enough. If you think you're the only one who can file documents, you're mistaken. He tried to chuckle again, but the look in my eyes stopped him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. A line had been drawn. When I got back to the house, Dessa was in the attic, sorting through old boxes. She didn't say anything, just handed me one marked Royce Private. Inside, photo albums, a worn leather ledger, and at the very bottom, wrapped in an old dish towel, a heavy brass key. I held it in my palm. Dessa looked at me, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. He had a safe. Still here? Basement pantry, behind the cabinet. The house held more than memories. Now it might hold proof. The email came at 11:02 p.m. subject line. Congratulations to our featured guests. It was forwarded by Cassie Townsend, a girl I hadn't spoken to since freshman year at UK. Didn't know you were involved again. Congrats, she wrote beneath the link. The message was short. The damage wasn't. I clicked. It was an announcement for the Rourke Legacy Garage grand opening. My name was listed near the bottom. Honored guest, May Rourke, co-founder's daughter. I hadn't been invited. And now I was being paraded again without consent. There's a particular clarity that comes when you realize you're being used as a nameplate for someone else's door. I sat still for 5 minutes. No rage, no confusion, just cold, sharp, focused. The event was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Public, press invited, speeches planned, perfect. Friday came fast. I didn't wear black. I didn't wear something soft or family appropriate. I wore steel gray, clean lines, a blazer that whispered, "You wanted a name, you're about to get a voice." They were cutting the ribbon when I stepped into the frame. Dad had just said the word, legacy. Bo was smiling politely. The crowd clapped. I walked to the mic without asking. No one stopped me. They didn't recognize me at first, until I spoke. Funny word, legacy, I said. Most people think it means what you leave behind, but sometimes it's what you leave out. Murmurs. I kept going. Behind this banner, this branding, this performance, there are numbers. And here's what they say. I opened my bag, pulled out a folder, clicked my remote. The screen changed, one chart after another. Over-leveraged loans, vendor kickbacks, overdue taxes filed under subsidiaries that didn't exist 3 years ago. I didn't look at Dad. I didn't have to. This isn't family, I said. It's a business dressed up in bloodlines and lies. You want to talk legacy? Let's start with who paid for it and who got erased to keep it pretty. Gasps. Dad moved toward the mic, but I beat him there. I'm done being a ghost in this story. I left a USB on the podium. Full audit, I said. No need to thank me. Ivy followed me off stage, eyes wide, voice low. May, don't do this here. I stopped. Then where, Mom? Where else would I finally matter? Bo didn't say a word, but he didn't stop me either. And when our eyes met, I saw it. Relief maybe, or fear, or both. I walked out without applause, but no one clapped for the Emperor when the crowd saw he was naked. That night the video hit local news, then regional blogs, then a TikTok montage with dramatic music and my line about ghosts. The internet did what it does, split like glass. She's bitter. She's brave. She's dangerous. She's necessary. My inbox exploded. Some from former employees, others from suppliers. A few from strangers who said, I know what it's like. Thank you for speaking. I didn't reply. I read. I saved. I breathed. At 1:47 a.m., I opened my journal. I didn't blow it up. I just struck the match they left lying there. Then I flipped to Grandma Edra's last note. Your voice matters, even if it shakes the room. I whispered. It did. And I slept. For once, it wasn't restless. Just before sunrise, my phone buzzed. A text. From my father. You've made your point. Let's talk. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. The silence woke me before the sun did. Not the kind that whispers peace, but the kind that hums with danger beneath the floorboards. Dessa hadn't made coffee. The wind outside had stopped. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. I checked my phone. News alerts still pinged about the garage explosion. Local paper headlines, video snippets, online debates. But there was no word from anyone in my family. No email, no message, no rage. That alone told me something was coming. At 9:12 a.m., a courier dropped a thin envelope at the front door. I didn't open it on the porch. I already knew it wouldn't contain apologies. Inside, a cease and desist letter signed by my father's legal team. Defamation, irreparable harm to business reputation. Cease all commentary related to Rourke Automotive Group. Attached was a warning. Further violations would result in legal action. I laughed. Short, cold, humorless. By noon, I got a call from someone at my old firm in Chicago. A private investigator had come by. Not a cop, not someone looking for facts, someone looking for flaws. He asked if you ever falsified numbers or had emotional episodes. My old supervisor sounded cautious. May, what's going on? He's not trying to sue me, I said. He's trying to break me. That evening, Dessa and I sat in the kitchen. The air felt tight. She stirred soup like her hands needed a task. He's not going to stop, I said. No, she replied. Because men like him don't fight to win. They fight to survive. And survival means burying threats. She was right, but I wasn't just a threat. I was his reckoning. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't touched in years. Harold May, my father's former attorney. He'd left under unclear circumstances. Rumors whispered of internal disputes and quiet payouts. At the time, I'd been too far away to care, but now, his silence might be the loudest truth I could find. I left him a message. He called back 2 hours later. May, he said, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this call. We met at a diner on the outskirts of Lexington. Neutral ground. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner, grayer, but alert. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Your father asked me to forge documents, multiple times. The most damning was an asset transfer. I believe it included the house. I stared at him. You forged the deed? I walked away before I had to, but I know who did it. The waitress poured coffee. Neither of us drank it. Would you testify? I asked. He didn't blink. I'll talk, but I want protection and a deal. I'm not offering you immunity, I said. I'm offering you freedom. He nodded. Then I'm in. That night, I sat at Dessa's dining table and began building the case. Not for court yet, but for leverage. Names, dates, payments, every document he could provide, every person my father had silenced, crushed, fired, ignored. I didn't think of revenge. I thought of something Grandma Edra once told me when I was 13 and furious at losing a school election. He plays with fear. You play with facts. By midnight, I had 10 pages of timeline, 4 witnesses, 2 sets of emails, and 1 game plan. I wasn't going to yell anymore. I wasn't going to storm podiums. I was going to unravel him quietly, piece by piece. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. 1 line. Stop digging or we'll bury more than your name. I took a screenshot, saved it, forwarded it to myself and 3 others. Then I said aloud, softly, not for the sender, but for me. He just made his next mistake. The bell above the garage door jingled like always. Same dusty air, same faint hum of fluorescent lights. I hadn't planned to come here. I just drove until the wheels knew where to stop. Dad looked up from behind the counter like he'd been expecting me. He smiled, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. May, he said, casual, like I hadn't detonated his empire a week ago. I'm not here to argue, I said. He leaned against the desk. Then what are you here for? I tilted my head. To ask what else you've rewritten. He didn't flinch, didn't answer. Just smiled that politician's smile that used to charm suppliers and suck the air out of every room I walked into. I didn't stay long. Later that afternoon, a manila envelope was waiting on Dessa's porch. No return address, no note. Just my name written in block letters. Inside was a scanned will. Grandpa Royce's, signed, notarized, dated 1 week before his stroke. It left the house. To Dessa. The copy Dad had filed with probate years ago said otherwise. I checked the signatures. One of the witnesses was a former mechanic from the original garage. He's now serving time for wire fraud and falsified documents. It wasn't just bad memory. It was deliberate fraud. When I showed it to Dessa, she stared for a long time without speaking. Then, quietly, she said, "I always knew your father stole things, but I didn't know he stole them from the dead." I sat with her in the silence. Neither of us touched the envelope again that day. It wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't about money. It was about a man so afraid of being less that he erased anyone who could hold up a mirror. That evening, while clearing out a corner of the basement, Dessa paused over an old cabinet. She tapped the back wall. "He kept a safe here," she said, "behind this panel." It took us 20 minutes to pull it free. The safe was there, rusted, heavy, a vault to silence. "The combination?" I asked. "He didn't use numbers," Dessa replied. "He used keys, 2 of them." I remembered the day Grandpa Royce gave me that little wooden box. I'd been 14. "You'll know what it's for when you're ready," he said. The box had held 2 small brass keys. I'd kept them in my desk for years, unsure why I couldn't throw them away. Now I knew. That night, I stood alone in the basement. The light was dim, the concrete floor cold beneath my feet. I slid the first key in. Click, then the second. Another click. The door creaked open, revealing a tray of dusty heirlooms, coins, faded photographs, a service medal from Korea, and an envelope. It was sealed tight, thick paper aged to yellow. On the front, in Grandpa Royce's handwriting, "To be opened only if they forget." My hand shook as I reached for it. But I didn't open it. Not yet. This wasn't a secret to unravel in silence. It needed to be heard. All of it. Out loud. In front of the people who thought they had the final word on what this family stood for. I walked upstairs. Dessa was already in the kitchen, a teacup in hand, as if she knew. I placed the envelope on the table between us. "We don't open it tonight," I said. She nodded. "Tomorrow." In front of all of them. We didn't meet at a law office. We didn't sit across from each other in some neutral, bloodless conference room. We sat at the dinner table, like we always used to when pretending we were a family. Ivy's hands trembled as she poured tea that no one would drink. Bo hovered near the window, watching the driveway like he wanted to run. Harlan sat back in his chair, unreadable. Dessa placed the china down like it mattered. And I placed the envelope in the center of the table. "We'll start here," I said, "but only once." Harlan chuckled under his breath. "You've been busy." "No," I replied. "I've been thorough." He smirked. "You want to humiliate me?" "No, I want you to make a choice." 3 papers slid across the table. The first, a resignation. The second, a deed transfer. The third, a restructuring agreement with my name at the top. "You step down," I said. "You return this house to Dessa, and you give me control of the company, so it doesn't collapse beneath what you built." He didn't touch them. "You're bluffing." I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of the forged will, Harold May's sworn affidavit, and the full financial audit, complete with a timeline of internal fraud and ghost vendors. "You don't have a business," I said. "You have a bomb, and I'm the only one who knows how to disarm it." Silence. Then, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "Bo, I'm done pretending," he said. "You said I'd inherit a legacy. You gave me a lie. May's been cleaning up your mess for years without ever being asked. She didn't come back to destroy you, Dad. You were already doing that yourself." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. "There's a press release going live in 10 minutes. It names May as interim CEO. I've already signed off." Harlan's mouth tightened. "You think this ends with a press release?" he snapped. "No," I said calmly. "It ends with a mirror. You either face it now or let the entire town watch you crumble through it." I turned to Ivy. She hadn't said a word. "Mom," I said, "you've protected him for so long, I don't even know if you remember what protecting your children looks like." She blinked fast. Her lips parted, but no words came. "You can stay quiet," I continued, "or you can be useful." The air felt like glass about to crack. Harlan stood. "You all think I'm the villain?" "No," I said. "I think you're afraid." He left without touching a single paper. Dessa picked up the deed transfer and folded it cleanly. "Let him be afraid." Ivy sat back down, tears slipping quietly down her cheek. She didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't defend. Bo looked at me. "Thank you." I didn't nod, I didn't smile. I just breathed. Because this didn't feel like victory. It felt like finally being free. That night I sat by the window of the house that was now legally Dessa's. The lights from the garage across town had been dimmed, just like the story that once drowned me out. My phone buzzed. A local journalist. "We'd like to run a piece. The daughter who reclaimed the empire." I stared at the screen, then out the window. The garden my grandparents planted was blooming again. "Let's talk tomorrow," I replied. "Tonight, I'm home." The floorboards didn't creak anymore. I noticed that first. They used to groan beneath the weight of arguments and generations and long-forgotten holiday dinners. Now they were quiet. Still. My footsteps moved without echo as I crossed the ancestral home. The one that had been promised, denied, and finally returned. Sunlight warmed the edges of the hardwood. Boxes lined the hallway, stacked and labeled in Dessa's handwriting. Family records, Royce's tools, May's junk. The safe was gone. The shadows that once gathered in its corners were gone too. The house was mine, legally, finally. But standing there, I felt like a visitor in someone else's memory. 1 week had passed since I laid the envelope on the table and let the truth do the cutting. The business had changed hands. On paper, Bo was CEO of the newly formed LLC, but I was the one building the foundation, tightening the bolts, dismantling the rotten beams while keeping the roof from caving in. 3 locations were closed, not because I was ruthless, but because I was done pretending bloated expansion meant success. We launched employee-first policies, cleaned the books, called vendors, paid back debts. People noticed. Customers stopped whispering. They smiled instead. Employees said things like, "It finally feels like someone's listening." I didn't appear in interviews. I didn't take credit. But every corner of that operation had my fingerprint on it. Harlan didn't fight the transition. He left, packed 2 suitcases and moved to Florida for his health. That was the headline. The truth was uglier. Several government departments had quietly opened inquiries. Nothing public yet, but the cracks were growing deeper by the day. He never said he was sorry. Just mailed me one line on a note card. "You got what you wanted." I filed it in a drawer I now labeled unnecessary. Ivy, on the other hand, tried. She started volunteering at the same community kitchen I'd quietly supported for years. She brought fresh pies to the garage staff, tended to Dessa's garden when she thought no one was watching. I didn't push her away, but I didn't let her in either. Some bridges don't burn, they just fade. I didn't need fire, I needed distance. Peace looked different now, smaller, quieter. I taught part-time at a local business school. Spoke to young women who reminded me of myself before I got edited out of the picture. Some days, I sat in the dirt and planted herbs beside Dessa. Lavender, basil, thyme. One's Grandma Edra used to rub between her palms before every meal. One afternoon, I unpacked the last box, the one I'd avoided. Inside, my childhood journal. The pages still smelled like oil and dust. I flipped to the last entry and wrote a new one. The legacy I built wasn't about inheritance. It wasn't about name. It was about becoming the woman I needed when I was 10. A week later, I visited the cemetery alone. The sky was overcast, but the air felt honest. I knelt in front of their stone, Royce and Edra side by side. I ran my fingers over the carved names, then placed the old house key at the base like a final offering. "I stayed," I whispered. "I fought. I forgave. Some of them." I stood, lighter than I'd been in years. That night after locking up, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop. A new message blinked on the screen. Unknown number. One line. You don't know me, but I think you knew my mother. She told me to find you if I ever needed help reclaiming something they took. I stared at it. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in the fight. Sometimes the battles we fight aren't for glory or recognition. They're for our own damn place at the table. And sometimes, when that seat is denied long enough, you build your own table. Looking back, I don't regret the silence I broke or the storms I started. I regret the years I spent thinking I needed permission to speak. But the truth is, no one can erase you if you refuse to stay invisible. So if you're watching this and you've ever been overlooked in your family, your job, your community, this is for you. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to burn it all down to start over. You just have to stop waiting for them to see you and start showing up for yourself. I'd love to know, what's your story? Have you ever had to fight for your place in your own family? Or maybe walk away to come back stronger? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched you. Let me know where you're watching from, or if it didn't hit the mark, tell me why. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If you made it this far and the story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that button so you don't miss the next journey. We've got more real, raw, human stories coming your way. Thanks for watching. You're not alone in your fight, and your voice, it matters.